Hey everybody, welcome back to Chris Anderson Comics. I'm here with a very special guest, Matthew Allison. How you doing, man?
Awesome.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Dude, I've been a fan of your work for a long time. I think the first time I discovered your work, I was just going to Emerald City Comic Con for the first time.
Okay.
And I don't know if this was like 2015, 16, 17, something like that. When did you start working on CANCORR?
2011.
Okay.
I didn't actually print it till, I printed it in 2011. So I started working on it in 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it probably wasn't long after that. And I got this puppy from you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was like, well, God, man, your work is phenomenal. And you were like, well, what do you want me to draw? And I think you did this at the con because you're insane. Maybe not. Maybe it was a pre-show thing. Regardless.
I would guess that would have been a pre-show. I may have gone back to my room and done it, but yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, I'm not going to get a Matthew Allison and not get a CANCORR. And dude, like the wires and stuff, I've got a lot of really cool stuff on my walls. But I think I look at how you did that more than I look at anything else.
Oh, wow. Okay.
On my walls.
That's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah. Definitely inspired me to figure out how to make organized chaos, you know?
Sure. Yeah. All those wires came from Barry Windsor Smith.
Right.
When he inked that Herb Trimpe Machine Man comic.
Yep.
He did the covers, I think, all on his own. And, of course, it starts out with just wires. Then slowly his face comes together. But that always stuck with me.
Yeah. And then he went on and pushed it even further with the Weapon X stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I think that you may have even taken it a step further with there's more depth to your stuff to it somehow. Okay. With shadows and stuff. I think we all just we take something from somebody and then just adjust it to make it better, and then it becomes our own thing. You were anyway using basically just microns to draw everything, right?
Still pretty much primarily microns.
Is it still primarily microns? I wondered about it because this a Sweet Sepulcher primer hopped up is really awesome. It looks like you use brush sometimes in it, but maybe you don't.
This I did, yeah.
Okay.
I use a Kuretake brush pen, and I needed to. Basically, it was taking me such a long time to do the actual Sweet Sepulcher book. I was like, I need to do something real down and dirty. Don't get too fussy with it. And so, there's a lot of brush work in that.
Yeah, just to have something out, right? Like just to keep your name.
It's hard when you go to a convention and you're like, oh, I've been here for 3 years in a row and I have the same thing that I had 3 years ago. So I needed something new. Kind of a stopgap.
That's always how it works. It's like people start to wonder where you are, and then all of a sudden you'll release like 6 things at a time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then they'll say, "Oh, you're so prolific."
Sure.
Well, remember, you didn't see anything from me for like 3 years.
Well, that's what Charles Burns has done. It seems like Charles Burns has put out 5 things in the last year or so, which is great. But
great for us. But there was a dry period there, Yeah. So the cover of this is friggin' amazing.
Thank you.
It's a risograph printed book, and you did it through Howling Pages in Chicago, right?
Mm-hmm.
In partnership with.
So they're. I guess I would consider them my LCS, even though I don't go in every Wednesday.
Right.
But it's the place I go when I'm going to buy comics. And
we're too busy. Yeah.
Yeah. And Alan, who runs it, he I knew he had this printer, and he had mentioned to me that he was going to be working with another local artist to start a publishing initiative through the shop. And at first I thought, well, I'll see if he'll let me work on the risograph to print this. And he was like, well, why don't we co-publish it? So that's what ended up happening. And, you know, went in, I did the saddle stitching, and he did all the printing on it. And so, yeah, it was definitely a collaborative affair on the actual production of the book.
That's awesome. The process of printing on these things is such a trip.
Yeah, it's so strange, and I don't know the whole history of those printers. I know that they've become very popular in the last decade or so with indie publishers and self publishers because you know they create such. We went pretty basic with this, but I know I'd love to get on and experiment with
And
color layers and stuff like that. So yeah.
There's a lot of screen tone and stuff in here. Did you end up doing that? Some of the way that it's scratched out, it almost looks like you physically did it, or did you put it like scans of screen tones in and do it digitally? Or
Yeah, I have actual old Zipatone that I had scanned in a long time ago that I'll use, and then just some deleter tones that I'd scan in, and then maybe I'll go with the eraser in Photoshop and get rid of some of it.
Yeah, I do the same thing because it's just cost effective that way.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
Yeah.
I'll have like a pile of Letraset and other ones that people will bring back from Japan, and they don't, friends that go there and they're not artists, they don't know what they're getting. There's some really weird ones, and if you use it once, well, now it's gone. So.
Oh yeah, and for some reason, I don't know if it's because my hands are greasy, but I can't get it to stick. So it's like I've been drawing on a page for a week. And when I try to put the tone on it, it just falls off. So yeah.
Yep. That's another hazard of it. I think they're just not super sticky anyway. So
yeah.
So I wonder if how to tackle the questions about this one, because there's a lot going on in this, and part of it is a primer or like examples of what you have coming up, and some of it is just exclusive to this. And so it's sort of not, I wouldn't say there's a theme, but it definitely skips around and is kind of all over the place with different things that's going on. Like you start out with this strip about this senator talking about Frederick Wortham and this book, A Sign for Cain. So was that a real book?
Yeah. It's a book he put out in the 60s.
And from the sounds of it, he almost like flipped on his initial.
Well, that's how it would seem. Okay. But I think what that book taught me was that he became so fixated on getting comics out of kids' hands and really focused on the idea that was going to have such a negative effect on children as they grow up in their mental health. This book is really just about like how we as a society can move away from believing that violence is just inherent in us.
Right.
And part of that book is a little bit about entertainment, but the majority of it is really about, real life violence and just how we've, in a lot of ways, just normalized it to where it's just, war is just something we do. It's just part of life, and violence is part of life, and crime is part of life. And so A Sign for Cain was a real eye opener and a good companion for Seduction of the Innocent, because that he's so demonized because of that book. But I think if people read Sign for Cain, it would give them a different perspective on him.
Yeah, it sounds like he not necessarily changed his mind, but thought on the topic more, and maybe I wonder if he knew, because we're still dealing with the repercussions of that book as an industry. I feel like to some degree.
Well, so how so? How do you?
Well, comics were a media or a type of media in the up into the 50s, up until then, that were sort of I think just held at the same level across the board as film or music or anything like that, and I feel like after that, and after the code came in, they had to start dumbing things down. And that's when comics became, sort of just for kids, and got really campy. And it took a long, I think, and sales just went do down, and I don't know that they ever recovered. And you look at the way that I think that manga and comics were on a parallel growth during that time period. Mm-hmm. And then once the trials happened here, it just dropped and never, they kept going, and we just never got back to, there's like a stigma. There's still a stigma to comics, I feel like. And I don't know if it's entirely from that, but I really think that it had a lot to do with it.
Well, I think what happened with those trials and the, with the publication of that book is that he put it on the publishers to decide, are you marketing these to children?
Sure.
If not, take them out of, locations where they're easily accessible to kids. It was really, in my mind, the publisher's decision to say, okay, yes, you're right, these are for kids, so we'll just police ourselves. Mm-hmm. And he was not for the code. He did not believe in the code. He was really, right. To me, it was really a question of distribution.
Right.
Where it's like, okay, don't put this next to the candy at the pharmacy. If you want to make adult comics, sell them at the bookstore, sell them someplace else. And the publishers didn't take the initiative to do that.
Right.
So any hamstringing that was done was really done by themselves. So, I think he gets the blame for that, but that was never his call.
Right.
What the publisher should or should not do. He was just strictly saying, just don't sell them to kids. And then whatever they did was up to them. The government obviously stepped in, and I think there's a lot of people, there were senators and people who weaponized what he did in that book.
Yeah.
That was somewhat out of his control.
Yep. Yeah, it was like the McCarthyism times and all that stuff happening. So,
and I think the other thing you got to factor in is, that book came out in 1953. Well, what else happened in that time period? Television.
Yeah.
Television was in every home by the end of the 50s. Going into the 60s, every home had a television. Kids didn't care about, a Western comic book when they could watch Gunsmoke or, Zorro or Lone Ranger on TV. So I think that's more of why comics turned to like superheroes or just being, Richie Rich or things that were more cartoony, was because the more realistic stuff, war stuff, you'd go see in the movies or you'd go see on television. There was no real reason to do comics about that, in my opinion.
Sure. No, that's a good point. I wonder why, because, Japan had television too. I wonder why it didn't affect it as much there. And I also know that another thing is, like you said, it was them policing themselves. They were also like trying actively to take Gaines and EC out, why the wording is the way that it was in the code, so.
Yeah, and I don't know what the distribution model was in Japan at that time. I mean, I know a lot of it was like vending machines, basically, to where a businessman getting on the train would grab some manga to read on his way into work.
Yeah.
And so, I think what I'm doing in Sweet Sepulcher proper, not so much in Hopped Up, is talking about the fact that the solution to these problems became alternative distribution channels. So by the end of the 60s, the undergrounds finally recognized, well, we can publish whatever we want, just as long as we don't sell it at a pharmacy. We're going to sell it in head shops. So you had the most vile, disgusting comics coming out within 15 years of the comics code. Things shifted to such a degree that like those artists were doing whatever they want, and those were the kids of the 50s. And so I'm talking in this a little bit about like what that suppression does when you say, okay, we're going to withhold this stuff, because so many of those underground artists were really influenced by the EC stuff because that stuff was so good.
Yeah.
As artists, they really glommed onto that and were like, oh my gosh, this stuff is great. And then you took it away from me. So we're going to, the one book that sustain that was Mad Magazine.
Right.
Which really was, I think, the exception to the rule when it comes to, like, it was for kids, but it was really smart.
Yeah.
So there was still stuff being put out that was technically just for kids, but was subversive.
Yeah, yeah.
At least with that book.
Yeah, right. They were able to skirt everything because it was they turned it into an actual magazine instead of a comic. I always wondered why they didn't just do that to the whole line.
I think that was again like a distribution issue where people were like, our racks aren't made for those.
Sure.
we have
they could have also been playing with fire. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a spinner rack in our store. We don't, by the time I was a kid, I remember in the 70s going into a store and there would be comics on the main racks, and then all the Warren magazines were up top, and heavy metal and stuff. And my dad would be up there looking at those while I'm looking at all the Marvel and DC stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Or they were in the behind the curtain, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then you go from this this like commentary to open it to this sort of this like you take a left turn, complete left turn.
Sure.
Even in the title of it, Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with anything, and I love it.
Yeah.
Or seemingly, maybe it does.
No, it very much does. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a definite reason to call it that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I can tell you what the reason is, but yeah, if you want to, please go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. Because it kind of goes on to, it's a story. I mean, I don't know how much you want me to tell people about it, because they're going to grab it anyway if they want it or not. But
yeah, I mean, I think, given that most of the run is sold out, I don't mind talking about it in detail, what the influences were or anything like that. Okay.
So basically the story is this guy, you see he's decorated the house for Halloween, and the neighbor comes over. It's full of spiders, and the neighbor comes over and talks about how his son died, and he's very meek. And his son died.
He's distraught. He's dealing with the death of his son. Yeah.
But even like just in relationship to the neighbor, who's just like, hey, whatever, you wimp.
Yeah.
So he's saying, his son died, and because he was bit by a spider, and so they're having a support group, and he's wondering if he'll just take it down, and the neighbor's like, you understand that the spiders are fake, you're dumb. And then he walks away and is basically like, I must be dumb. It's like, oh, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Well, so the reason behind that story was, I was listening to an interview with the comedian Jim Jeffries.
Yeah.
And Jim Jeffries has this whole bit about gun control in Australia.
Right.
And talking about the differences between, our attitudes about guns in the United States versus there, and gun violence numbers and all stats and all that stuff. And in that interview, I think it was with Neil Brennan, and Neil Brennan asked him if he had heard from anybody about that routine, specifically that chunk of his act. And he said, oh, Ryan Reynolds reached out to me. I was like, that's weird. So then I was looking up and looking at Ryan Reynolds gun control, like what side is he on there? Because to me, when you have in Deadpool 2, I think it's in Deadpool 2, it might be in the first one, there's a shot of him like shooting all these bad guys, and it's just slow motion gun violence. The whole movie is just gun after gun after gun, bullets flying everywhere. And then he takes the barrels of his gun and he inhales the smoke from the gun. And then he looks at the camera and he's like, oh, I'm going to touch myself tonight. And this is a guy who's pro gun control, and yet is sexually fetishizing gun use in this movie.
Right.
And I brought this up to a friend of mine. He's like, yeah, but it's fake. I'm like, yeah, I know it's fake, but you're promoting gun use you're making gun use fun and sexualizing it and making it seem like, oh, it doesn't matter. You just shoot all these people and walk away and it's fun. So I just started thinking about like, well, what else you know, like the idea that it's such an epidemic in this country and that children die all the time from gun violence, and yet Deadpool and Wolverine was this massive hit, and people took their kids to go see it. And so you have kids who are the weird dichotomy of children having active shooter drills in their schools,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they're playing, you know, Call of Duty, or they're, you know, playing some other first person shooter game. I have a next door neighbor who is a teenager, and every time their window is a buddy in ours, and I can see he's like constantly playing first person shooters all day long.
Right.
So I just thought, what a weird way to grow up, where it's just this odd dynamic between this is our entertainment, and yet it's this horrible aspect of real life. And I was just trying to come up with an analogy for that. And this whole spider thing popped into my head of like, well, you know, what if somebody was, you know, what if spider bites became an epidemic?
Right.
And yet people just put giant spiders in their yards and dressed up as spiders. Like, I mean, we do that. We have all kinds of things that could kill us that we just turn into, you know, goofy Halloween costumes or whatever. But it's not so much a judgment about it. It's just an odd way of looking at this, how we've come to normalize and just accept something that's so horrific on that level.
Right.
And
yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense, you know, for the strip too. I mean, that's well put. It always bothers me that people can watch movies that have like the most horrific, you know, gun violence and things in it, but the second that there's like nudity on it, they, you know, have to cover their eyes, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's like, no wonder that there's, you know, such a, I don't know, like part of our culture that is so pent up, you know, and is totally fine with, you know, grabbing a gun and taking care of things, but, you know, has no idea how to deal with their own, you know, sexual natures or whatever, or, you know, just normal body parts. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, and I know a lot of people, you know, have felt that way about Hollywood, especially. Yeah, and I, you know, just to be clear for, you know, anybody watching this, like, normally the argument is like, well, you know, it's not like a normal person who's not violent is going to, you know, play one of these video games or watch Deadpool and Wolverine and then go out and shoot a bunch of people. And it's like, it's not even that. It's just the idea, again, that we, as you just said, like, there's natural things that we do and things that are good, you know, sex is good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, when I grew up, if we went to the drive-in, we could see the most horrific movie. It didn't matter. Like my parents would take me to see whatever movie, and I could watch all the gross scenes. I remember that they took me actually to a regular theater to see American Werewolf in London. But every time there was nudity, I had to close my eyes.
Right. Yeah. Yet as he's like ripping and transforming and stuff, that was fine.
Yes. Yeah.
We've got this, like, as a society, we have just such a backwards way of thinking of things.
Yep.
We've normalized it, and it's, we've just accepted it.
Yep.
And then you move on to this really cool part, illustration wise, where you pop in these old like candy wrappers, which is really something cool to see. And then on top of it, you add these like old Halloween masks. Were these actual Halloween masks? And you?
Yeah, and I found out.
Feeling it?
No, I found some photos on Instagram, and then somebody pointed out later when I was posting some of these that there was a photographer, and I debated with Alan about crediting the photographer because it's like, I was like, well, the photographer didn't make the mask. That guy is actually like a Dick Smith thing, the guy with the black bar behind his head. But it was kids in the 1950s wearing these Halloween masks.
The rubber Halloween masks, man, they were always, there was like a like Spencer's Gifts or whatever, you know, would always have like a million of them up on the wall, and I would just sit there and stare at them as a kid. And oh my God, those would be so awesome to just have. And then you would, have a friend who got one or something, and then you put it on and be like, oh my God, this stinks. Like, and and it's hot and sweaty and disgusting. And like, no, this is a better like art piece than it is an actual functional thing.
Exactly.
It still looked so cool. Like I still wanted them all.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing with this, including these masks from the 50s was that, again, going back to Frederick Wortham, what he was seeing, it was like it was post World War II where you had just horrific atrocities. And yet kids were just fascinated by monsters and death and corpses and decomposition and all these things. And so you get these little kids running around eating candy dressed as corpses.
Right.
And how bizarre that is. What a bizarre thing. And again, not like in a judgmental way of just like, but just a curious way of like, why are we so attracted to that? And I was a kid. I mean, I'm still attracted to that. I've got skulls all over my studio, but
right. Yeah.
Very odd.
It is. And you got to think too, like, it's not like the kids were like, I want, out of nowhere, like, I want to be dressed as a corpse. Like there were grown men who were deciding what was going to come out. And these were the guys who just came back from World War II or Korea, and lived this. And we're like, let's do this.
Exactly. And that's,
toughening kids up.
Exactly. And in A Sign for Cain, Wortham taught, because he was from, I believe he was from Austria.
Okay.
But I think he worked in Germany as well. I'm probably getting those facts wrong, so excuse me for messing that up. But regardless, he got out before the Nazis took over, but he was very aware of what was going on there. So for someone of that age who narrowly escaped being part of the Holocaust, it would have been incredibly strange for him. His job was to help kids with mental health issues, of which there were a lot in New York, and he was dealing with kids whose dad had gone off to the war and either never came back or he came back shell shocked, and so he's like, why are we feeding these kids this horrible stuff when this real thing just happened that was awful, that we're bolstering ourselves saying, oh, we went over there and we fought this evil, and yet we're feeding kids all this junk, essentially. That's how he looked at it.
Right. Are these quotes from that book still?
They are from A Sign for Cain.
Okay.
Yeah. I needed to make that a little clearer, I think, but yeah, they're all from A Sign for Cain.
It's okay. It's sort of all. It doesn't. You don't need to know that. It's still all part of the same, spirit of the whole book.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he just starts to talk about how one justification for offered through abundance of violence is the art is that it's in accordance with the spirit of the times. But art is not something passive or negative. It can be a positive force that can help us overcome the spirit of the times. And and he goes on to expand on all of that basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was pretty interesting too.
Yeah. Well, and even just like looking at that, where you're like, we had a candy called an atomic fireball.
Right. Yeah.
What an odd thing to. So bizarre.
Yeah, it's so weird. It was very, very, very strange. The textures that you got on these are really cool. I know that so let me just ask you about this. So you've got these really cool textures on here. Are you doing that with like stippling, or did you use like a sponge or anything?
That's stippling, yeah.
You are a madman. I love it. These were up, you're with, you're rep by Athenium Art.
Yes.
Comic art now, right?
Yeah.
So I think Sean had put these pieces up on there.
Yeah, I think there's a couple left.
Are there?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, people should go and snag them because these are really, really, really cool drawings, man.
And I don't know what I did with the cover. I had the original for the cover I was going to send them, and I can't find it anywhere. So when we move, hopefully it'll pop up.
Right. Well, yeah. Did you use So on the cover, did you use the brush pen on that? Because you got a bunch of line weight on that. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, all the outlines are the brush pen. Yep.
Okay. Because I know, like, I think I remember talking to you some time ago where you said that you weren't using a brush pen at the time, but you were actually making the thickness just by like going over the line some more.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, I'll do the basic, and then if I need to refine it a little bit, I'll go back in with like a 003 and tighten up some of the lines.
Right. So you got this sort of fictitious, like Bazooka Joe-esque kind of interview with this character, who's like supposed to be a cartoonist from an interview with this cartoonist from 1973, created a character called Bomber John. And it was like, is it supposed to have been like in a bubblegum wrapper kind of thing, or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that plays specifically into Sweet Sepulcher. There's a crucial part of a story with a Bomber John packet of bubble gum.
I see. So he's sort of like a standoffish like character, kind of comes across like pretty like grumpy and cantankerous, here. But as it goes on, you start to learn that he started this Bomber John strip that was sort of like pro-war and like kind of pro-violence with a cartoony thing to it, as a lot of that stuff was back then.
Yeah.
And then at some point, basically got in with the hippies, right?
Yeah.
And sort of flipped and started sneaking like anti-war things in there. And eventually it kind of got him fired from the strip, right?
Yep.
And then they get Bob and John rolling papers,
Yes.
at the time. I love that. What made you, this is like one of the catalysts for starting at the beginning of the book, the new book?
Yeah. So basically, I was reading another book by Wortham called A Show of Violence, which was some of his case studies. He actually worked with Albert Fish, who was like this notorious child killer. He was his psychiatrist who worked on his trial, trying to determine if he was insane or not for his trial. And so I was reading that. And also, like, I'm constantly dieting and I'm constantly trying to get off sugar. I have a huge sugar addiction. So I was tying those things together and just piecing all these different things that were on my mind. This was all during early on in COVID. And then tying in stuff from my personal life. My grandfather on my mom's side was a B-52 pilot. His name was John. So, I was thinking about, like, as a kid, you just think like, oh, that's great. And I was like,
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
How cool.
Yeah, exactly. And then my uncle is a retired lieutenant colonel in Marines, and he flew fighter planes, and then you just realize like, oh yeah, they probably killed a lot of people, So,
yeah, it's the same.
yeah.
My uncle was in the first wave at Normandy, and
Oh wow.
it was always like, isn't that amazing? Well, he was definitely had PTSD and all sorts of stuff from that, and it's like, God, yeah, they had to do some awful stuff,
Yep.
and but the way that it's framed for us, there's like, and to some degree, sort of rightly so because we're not living under a Nazi regime. Well, actually,
Yeah. I mean,
but
that's just it. Like with the atomic fireball thing, that's I remember reading about Hiroshima and just the devastation and how horrifying that was, and the argument that the author was making was like, we did that almost as an experiment to see, okay, well, we have these bombs, we may as well use them on civilians and end this war quickly, and also be able to determine exactly what these things do, which is awful. But then anytime I bring that up to people, they're like, well, would you rather that the war have gone on or that they would have, it's like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, well, they could have done it in the ocean and they didn't have to do it twice.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah. And then here we get into this story now, man. you're speaking my language
Sure.
here, quite a bit. Like we're roughly the same age, I think, and you get into like when your family would go to the video stores in the 80s, you'd always get to pick your own movie. And one night you chose The Gates of Hell. And this is how this story kind of gets going.
Yeah.
I think it was a special time.
It was. I mean, I hate to sound, I mean, I am a middle-aged man, I'm beyond middle-aged. And it drives me crazy when I listen to podcasts and I hear people talking about, well, this was before the internet. It's like, yeah, I mean, but people, if you don't know what it was like to go to a video store and you only know streaming or whatever, and I know like a 20-year-old is going to be aware of the fact that there used to be VHS tapes, but you don't understand what that experience was like to walk into a video store in the 80s.
Yeah. There are so many things that never even got bounced to DVD.
Yeah.
Let alone into a streamer.
Yeah.
That were just like golden gems, and people don't. I remember like going to, and you had to go to like the mom and pop video stores. You couldn't go to like a regular video store. You had to go to the smaller ones, and just trying to track down the unrated version of Dead Alive was like a thing that I just like, and you just, once you decided that you had to find it, you had to find it. You know, you get your mom to cart you around or dad to cart you around everywhere to try to find it. And finding all these just weird gems, and I was the same way. I had much older parents, and so I have 4 older brothers, and they were kind of like, by the time I came around, they were like done raising kids. And my mom was taking care of her mom, who was elderly, and so I just kind of like did whatever. And I watched so many things I probably shouldn't have watched at this age.
Oh, sure.
And I like how you do this too, where you have these little like comments from the I guess like the letters page from Fangoria magazines. Is that what this is?
Yeah, so back in the 80s, early 80s, Fangoria, if you got a subscription, you got to put in one of those personals. So in the back of each issue, they would have a page and a half of just, people's random comments. Either I'm looking for a copy of whatever on Betamax, or I want to give a shout out to my uncle for giving me this, subscription or whatever.
Yeah. There's some weird ones. So this one, it starts off sane enough where it's like, my mom freaks out when she sees me reading Fang. Keep up the gory work. And then you get other ones where it's just like someone roasting somebody, like Brian Kennedy eats maggots raw. Like, I love it. So you go into saying like, okay, so you picked it out, obviously because the cover was friggin' awesome.
Oh yeah.
The box art for these things were incredible.
Yeah, and they were huge. And I would have dreams, like after video stores started to die out, I would have dreams where I would find some hole in the wall video store, but in the dreams, the video boxes were even bigger. They were like the size of cereal boxes. They were just enormous. Yeah.
So you said a few weeks earlier you brought home Zombie, which is okay.
Yeah.
Like you don't say how old you were here, but I imagine like 8 years old-ish.
Oh no, right underneath your finger.
Oh, 10 years old. There you are. And so I love this little thing, like cheese slices on saltines. So you're watching with your dad.
Yeah. Fancy.
And that Gates of Hell gave you the same feeling with this of disgust and unease. It starts with a priest hanging himself. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. And
then this scene with this prosthetic head where this guy gets put on this drill press or drill bench thing.
Yeah.
And they probably put something in there, but it says like your dad was watching it and thought that it was real.
Oh yeah.
The optic nerve, like the eye actually rolls back from the drill because he thinks that it snagged the optic nerve. And I was like, that is a great little thing.
It doesn't, like, you watch it on Blu-ray or 4K, and it's like, that doesn't happen. Like, he's like, oh, smoke's coming out from his skull. The skull, but this is like really bad grainy VHS. Like
Oh yeah.
the effects actually worked better when you couldn't see as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, everything got cleaned up way too much, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then you were like, well, if the, thinking back about it, if my dad really thought that, he should have been calling the FBI.
Exactly.
Like, that would have been the right thing to do.
Yep. Kind of like Charlie Sheen calling the FBI about that guinea pig movie. Do you know about that?
Uh-uh.
So Hideshi Hino is a manga artist, and he also made some movies in the series called Guinea Pig, and one of them had a fake snuff film. And I guess Charlie Sheen, somebody gave him this tape, and he was convinced that it was real and called the FBI
Oh my
to
God.
investigate. Yeah.
That's amazing. So and then you talk about how you got into like deep into special effects, and you started to buy Fangoria every month, and you had like Tom Savini's book about makeup and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Those books were just the best.
Oh yeah, yeah. I poured it. Mine is falling. Still have it, and it's like falling apart. I've looked through that thing a billion times.
There were these I remember being I think it was elementary school. There was this line of books. They were like square, thin, and they were orange covers, and they were black and white. And it was like there's a Godzilla one, and
Yep.
there was do you remember those books? You know what I'm talking about at all?
I never saw them in person, but those were some that you could order out of the back of the Warren magazines.
They were in our library, and one was about spontaneous human combustion and photos of people who had supposedly burst into flames.
Wow,
and all this, and it was in our elementary school library.
That's crazy.
And those were the books that I checked out, probably 100%.
Yep. Yeah.
Didn't check anything else out. And you were and you talk about how you thought that it would make you a bit of an outcast or a nerd, but it actually had the opposite effect, where all of a sudden,
oddly enough, yeah,
that's really funny. You get this 3D latex chest burster on your shirt. Did you have a shirt like that for real?
I did, and I got it when I was probably 10, and so by the time I was 13, I had a huge growth spurt, and I was super tight, but I still wore it to school.
Yeah. Probably works better when it's tight,
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it's not drooping down or whatever.
Exactly.
So yeah, people started inviting you to parties and asking you to bring gross films, and you brought The Gates of Hell because they wanted to see the grossest film. And then you would bring your Fangorias to class, and one day, one of the assistant teachers or whatever, busted you with it and was chuckling about it, but put it in a drawer for you to pick up later.
Yeah.
But then the actual teacher, when you went to go get it, the actual teacher was there, and she was
she's horrified. She
yeah.
Because she didn't know anything about it. I just walk in and I'm like, "Hey, I'm supposed to pick up this book," and she asked me where it was. I think he put it in the bottom drawer, and she opens it, and of course she's horrified. She's this old lady, has no idea what she's getting ready to look at. Yeah,
yeah, but she's also she did. It seems to me like she did cross a line, but back then there was this. There were lines that teachers could cross, and you can't.
My vice principal had a paddle in his office.
Yeah, exactly.
I got sent to his office twice, and he did threaten to paddle me. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember we had a gym teacher that was known for just roughhousing kids who were acting up, and I remember, and my brothers had him, so 16 years before I even went to the school. And then when I went to the school, I remember he kicked a kid in the ass because he wasn't listening. And then he finally got let go for that one.
Yeah. Wow.
But it took, however many years.
Yeah, it took the culture to completely shift. It's that's not appropriate anymore.
And funny enough, I think I heard that the field at the school is named after him now.
Oh wow. Okay.
Which is really crazy. So then you talk about how your friends were completely upset about it, and you were feigning. You you understood why she was upset about it. So you're yeah, guys, yeah, that's right. That's you're right. That's bullshit. But then deep down inside, you're like, no, I understand why she did it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and now then you end it with this whole thing about her, you know, um, how she made a valid point from outsider's perspective, you know, on the institution of violence and stuff, and that she'd be rolling in her worm-filled dank grave. And I love how you end it. Gnarly.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mrs. G.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah, she's probably long dead.
Oh yeah, you know.
Well, 1986, I think I said. Yeah.
Right. And then these are the actual pages from the, so up until this point, these are not previews, right?
That's all new stuff. Yeah.
Right.
And initially it was going to be like an ash can essentially.
Sure.
But then for whatever reason, I was like, I had these stories in mind. I'm like, I'm just going to do these super quick, get them done in a week, and throw those in there. So it's exclusive to this comic.
And thematically, they're kind of related, right?
So, yeah, I mean, really, like, you know, what I was just saying about Frederick Wortham's shock at, like, geez, we're giving these kids, you know, she had the same shock to this magazine of like, why are your parents letting you read this magazine where like every picture, but you know, I like the artistry of it. I wanted to know how they did that special effect.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to learn about this stuff. And I think, you know, you just have to step back and look at somebody else's perspective based on their exposure to something. So all those guys that ended up making underground comics, they were artists. So they looked at it from an artistic standpoint. They appreciated it on that level. Wortham wasn't talking about it like that. He thought they were trashy. It was trashy art anyway, but he was more like, you know, look at this from the point of view of somebody who's not an artist, from somebody who is just taking in the imagery on a very base level. Right. What does that do to somebody who's just constantly exposed to that stuff and isn't thinking about, well, how did they render this shading or anything like that?
Right, so, right.
Totally different mindset.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. You know, you gotta think about both sides of things.
Yeah.
And then so these are the pages from the upcoming book. Yep. Dude, this is some wild stuff. You're pulling from all sorts of influences in here and just being yourself, you know, and it's, sign me up. This stuff looks great.
Right on. Thanks.
And it's you know, it's completely out of context, so you know, you're not getting what the story is, and it's just, you just get a chance to just look at the beautiful art. So
yeah, pure preview stuff for the art.
Yeah, man, I love this stuff. the almost like Large Marge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then so is it going to be like, what form is it going to take? Is it going to be almost like an anthology that you're doing of different stories, or is it going to be one straight sort of thing? Because it seems like there's things within it.
Yeah. So initially it was going to be one 48-page book that had 5 chapters in it, and each chapter takes place in a different era. So there's the 1953, the 73, which takes place on the moon. It's the future, as seen through the lens of 1953. And then there is a section that's in the early 90s.
Okay.
But then that section is broken up into smaller sections. But
is
now,
that this section?
Yeah, with Butcher Bird. But what I basically decided to do was like, well, it's going to take me forever because I'm constantly going back and forth between commissions and working on this book.
Right.
So I wanted to have it out 2 years ago, but I got to pay bills. So that's how I make my living. Although now with what's happening with the economy, I think my commissions are going to drop most likely. So,
hope not.
But anyways, yeah, hopefully not. My thought was, well, I'll do single issues, 24 pages, and it'll be one chapter of Sweet Sepulcher and then new CANCORR stuff.
Oh.
Each issue will have the Sweet Sepulcher chapter and then like anywhere from an 8 to 12 page CANCORR story.
What? Okay.
That
is fantastic. That's some great news, man. That's like, I can't wait to see that.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, This is so cool. Your work is just, and here's the back. Look at that. Your work is just so inspiring. You know, I am like, I'm all about my line, you know, when I do my stuff, but I'm also impatient and about
Sure.
speed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you are sort of the opposite of that. You are all patience, it seems. And maybe in the under drawing you is where you have your uh what am I trying to say? Like the energy, and then you go and then you make these beautiful lines, and it's something I just can't do, and I appreciate looking at it, you know.
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, the only pushback I would give on the I feel like I'm incredibly impatient because what I do is I barely pencil. Like I
Yeah,
start inking before I've even penciled a full figure. And I have a good friend who's a great artist, great penciler, Aaron Conley, and
yeah, I know,
it's
Aaron. Yeah,
on
he's
me.
awesome.
And he's like, you need to spend more time on your penciling. Your forms will be better. And it's like, but my brain just can't. Like, I got to get to the inking. That's where the wires come from a lot of times because it's like my brain needs something to work on. So if I'm stuck where I'm like, I don't know how to place this figure in this room or whatever, I'll just work on wires while my brain works that out on the back burner. So the
Right.
wires are mindless. That's just pure mindless stuff, or the stippling, or feathering
Sure.
or something. And I'm working out all the other stuff in the back of my brain rather than sit and pencil it over and over again.
Yeah.
I just put it away and then come back to it later. So there is a lot of impatience, but I've just worked out some crazy system of like having little chunks of things to work on at all times. So whenever I'm stuck, I just go on to something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I kind of do that a little bit too.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. That's yeah, that I'm not an eraser. Even with even with my
Yeah.
underdrawing, I just lay it down, and if that's the way it is, it's got
Yep.
the energy in it. Let's go.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know. Um,
Do you design characters like in a sketchbook, or do you design on the page?
if it's my own stuff, I need to just go. So I design on the page a lot of the time.
Yeah,
With
same here.
work for hire stuff, obviously, I'm going to need to show things, so I do it in a sketchbook or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I you know, my process that I use today might not be the process that I use tomorrow. I'm
Yeah.
all over the place, you know. I'm
Yep.
always trying to refine and make it faster or better or whatever, you know, just trying to grow and change and keep it exciting for me, because if I get bored.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's the beauty of comics is that you can evolve. The thing that's frustrating, and you probably experience this too, is when you somehow magically come upon some way of doing things and you only do it for like a couple weeks and then it goes away somehow. Like you learn how to draw something and you're like, oh my gosh, I nailed it. But then you move on and then you go back like, God, why can't I draw like that anymore? I drew like that for a little while, but for
Yeah.
some reason it dissipated. So yeah.
Yeah, it's because I think it's because you're trying to chase it. You know, you have an expectation of it where when it was happening naturally, and then you're
Yeah.
overthinking it. You know,
Yeah.
I'm having this problem right now. I swear that people who make things that I like are reading my mind and deciding to work against me.
Yeah.
Because there's a Kuretake brush pen that this one right here that
Yep.
they all of a sudden stop making.
Yep.
They don't make it anymore.
You can get them on eBay for like $25 from Japan. Yeah.
And luckily, I ordered like 50 of them like a
Okay.
couple of years ago, but I've only got like 3 or 4 left.
Yeah. I
And
hear
then
you.
like my favorite brush from Japan that I've finally just started working for me, they discontinued that now. I'm like,
Oh
what am I
man.
supposed to do?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to Japan in September, so let me know what you're looking for, and maybe I
Man,
can find it there.
I've
So
had Sean, you know, Japan Book Hunter out there trying to find it for me, and they're just like
yeah,
they discontinued it, man, and I
yeah,
just can't
all right,
find it anywhere.
yeah,
But I appreciate that.
okay, yeah, because I was using the Kuretake extra fines, and those
Yep.
went away first. I could
Yeah.
still find the fines, and I bought as many of those as I could, and I have like 3 that are about to die, and I don't know what I'm going to do.
Well, listen, if you find a barrel of them somewhere over there,
Okay.
let me know. I'll go in on it with you.
All right, cut this part out. I don't want anyone else knowing.
Yeah, right.
I don't want people hitting me up and like, hey, get some for me. Like,
yeah, right. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm really looking forward to the book. I love everything you do, and I just can't wait to see more. Where can people find you on the webs?
Really, Instagram, CANCORR, CANKORR. I do have a Blue Sky account. I need to keep pushing that, and I don't even really remember what it is. I think
forget about it too.
Matthew G. Allison dot whatever it is. I think if you just search Matthew Allison, it'll come up. And I have a Big Cartel shop. If you search Big Cartel Matthew Allison, you can buy my. I've got some stuff up there. I got the CANCORR hardcover still. And but I'm down to like 100 copies of those, so those are probably going to be gone by the end of the year.
Yeah, and last I checked at Howling Pages, there were a couple of these left. So get them while they're hot. Get the CANCORR hardcovers while they're hot, and put a couple bucks in Matthew's pocket. Thanks so much for coming on, man. And I guess we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, bye. Join my Patreon to see my work before anyone else, plus score physical sketchbooks, mini comics, and commissions delivered right to your door, and reading my new books, Something Seems Off and Three-Headed Pigman, as they are made. Go to my website to order original art, commissions, and my books, Lost Angels, Spectral: A Showcase of Fear, Chaotic Neutral, and more. Gray Matter Drip, The Art of Chris Anderson, is available now from Cosmic Lion Productions. Here are the upcoming conventions I'll be at the time of this recording. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. It helps spread the word. Thanks.